Hi, everyone. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining with me today. It's Andrea here, and I am so excited that we have Holly Klaassen with us today. She is the founder of the Fussy Baby site, as well as a couple Facebook groups specializing in helping parents with high-need babies and spirited toddlers and young children. She has also written she's the author of the Fussy Baby Survival Guide, Sleep Training in High Need Babies, as well as everything you need to know about colic and nothing you don't. So, Holly, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited and honored that you're here.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much
I
for inviting me. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag.
absolutely.
So if I sound
Oh,
like I'm waiting a while, that's why.
that is perfect. No, thank you so much. Um, so I have a couple questions for Holly, a couple of questions, and I would love to hear and share her experience with having a high needs baby of her own. So, Holly, can you please share with us a bit about your experience with having a high needs baby, what that looked like for you, and how you discovered that you did have a high needs baby?
For sure. So I'll go back 16 years ago when I had my first child, and she was a little bit colicky. And so when we decided to have another baby 2.5 years later, we thought, oh, we're going to get our easy baby now. And then we had Sammy, who was anything but easy. And as a newborn, we suspected he had colic or maybe reflux, or he was just extremely fussy and didn't want to sleep, had troubles feeding, just needed like constant attention and stimulation. And so we kind of thought, okay, well, maybe there's something sort of, medically going on with him. The doctors ruled out everything. And then we thought, okay, well, he's just colicky. So then, by 3, 4 months, that should have resolved. And I remember around 4 months, we realized, oh man, like the all day screaming had stopped, but he was still super intense, very sensitive, needed to be held and entertained constantly. Sorry about that. Um, and so, um, yeah, so then I remember going online and kind of Googling, 4-month-old fussy baby and coming across Dr. Sears' article on what is a high need baby and kind of going down that list and feeling like, oh my goodness, Sammy meets like every single criteria on this list, just in terms of, the fussiness, the not falling into a routine easily, persistence, determination, not a self-soother, all these things. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is not colic. This is an early indication of his temperament. And so part of that was very freeing because now we could be like, okay, we can stop going to the doctor, we can stop worrying, we can stop sort of trying all these new things. This is the way he is. And then the other part of it was, oh my goodness, if this is an early manifestation of his temperament, what are we in for down the road? Yeah. So I think a lot of parents have kind of come to that realization. It's kind of a gift and a curse, right? Um, so for Sam, he for sure, like the newborn period was definitely the most difficult. And then he gradually started to get easier. And I know we saw a big shift in him around 8.5 months, the day he started to crawl. I think just because he was able to sort of get where he wanted to go, be a little bit more independent, keep himself entertained more. So that was kind of our first experience of figuring out that he was high need.
Okay, absolutely. That sounds so familiar with my experience too with Abby. Right away, I kind of figured out, oh, I think it's her temperament,
Yeah.
that there's nothing really wrong.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you so much for sharing that. And then, so, so your experience, um, with the high needs baby, that brought you to creating your website. Is that correct?
Yeah. So like I said, I did a lot of Googling. I think a lot of parents do in those early days, just trying to figure out what was going on because the doctors really couldn't help us. They would just say, "Oh, it's just colic," and we knew that there was, something more going on there. So I had spent so much time sort of looking for resources online and could find just so little. And you have to remember this was in 2006, so it was quite a while ago, right? Um, so I had this weird, crazy idea. I'd never done anything like that with, I had done writing before, but I had not done like any type of web development, web design, anything like that. I'm like, okay, I got to get a website out there so that other parents who are struggling, who are going from doctor to doctor, who are frustrated and exhausted, so that they can get, some really like accurate information about these babies. So I remember, so Sam was 5 months old at the time, and I would put him to bed at night, and I would go to a coffee shop and stay there till 11 or 12 every night, just creating content, doing interviews with experts in the field who were so gracious and in just allowing me to ask them questions. And yeah, that's how it started. And I remember the very first month, Google was very different back then, but I remember the very first month I had 1,000 people come to my website after searching for fussy baby. And that was
Mhm.
just so rewarding, thinking, wow, like that's 1,000 parents who are hopefully finding some comfort and encouragement knowing that they're not alone.
Absolutely. I remember finding your site at like 2 in the morning after feeding Abby, in the middle of the night and just feeling so desperate
Yeah.
and also so comforted and encouraged by coming across, your content and services and just knowing that I wasn't alone. I think that's such a huge thing.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so I think you touched on this, and it's definitely on my mind having a spirited toddler. But what do those like high needs and spirited traits look like in later childhood?
So I mean every child is different, right? I've heard a parent say, we had a really fussy baby, but then once they became a toddler or preschooler, all of a sudden they were really easy and a totally different child. But that is kind of definitely not the norm, I would say. Typically, what you'll see, because this is their behaviors when they're infants and toddlers, really are, um, like I said earlier, manifestations of how they're going to be later. So, for instance, if as an infant, a lot of high need babies are very sensitive, so they cry the second their diaper is wet, or they scream bloody murder, right? They're very persistent. So, if they don't want to sleep or they don't want to do something, they're going to let you know, and there's no convincing them. Super determined, like all these traits that you see in them as infants, they still have those traits later, but of course they look different, right? So as a toddler, as you're probably discovering, when they get their mind set on something, they're going to do it, come hell or high water. Still very sensitive,
Yeah.
often sensitive to, if we raise our voice even a little bit, they have a meltdown because they feel like they're in trouble. Um, Super determined, persistent. Not easily distractible. So if they want something, with more easygoing kids, we typically say, "Oh, you just need to redirect them to something else." And there's definitely truth in that, but you got to be much smarter and more creative with your redirection, right? So they need a bit of a different parenting style. But as kids get sort of older, if we're able to nurture those traits in them and just really accept them for who they are rather than, punishing them because they're naturally this way, they really grow into their big personalities, which is what I've seen with my son over the years, is that all those traits that were so challenging and frustrating to us as parents when he was younger are his best traits. So
Mhm.
he's going to be turning 14 in a couple months, and he's always the kid who you can't convince him to do anything. So his friends cannot pressure him into something if he's not interested in doing it. He's kind of the leader of the pack. He's the one with the ideas, and that's going to push through and be really persistent. Um, his empathy is amazing. Like the fact, like how sensitive he is to other people's feelings, and so I've just been so I guess one of my passions with parents is just to help them realize like it's so hard at the beginning. There's so many challenges that you wouldn't get with a more easygoing child, but as they get older, the benefits are incredible. And they're amazing adults. Like they grow into amazing teenagers and adults, and then all your hard work is worth it. And then some in the end.
I love hearing that. Thank you so much for sharing. And I've heard you speak about Sam before, and that's just such an encouragement to a parent like me who's like, well, I wonder, I love Abby and I think she's amazing and she has amazing qualities that, there's always that question with spiritedness where you're like, I wonder how it will manifest later. And
Mhm.
it's wonderful and comforting to hear that, those qualities can really be turned into strength. So I love that.
Mm.
Um, so I know you mentioned parenting styles and how parenting styles that parents with spirited children have to be a little more creative
Mhm.
um, with spirited children. So I know you touched on that, and I know you have services through your website. Can you please share about your services and your content through the Fussy Baby site?
Sure. So I do have the Fussy Baby site, and that's really targeted for parents of fussy infants, kind of up to toddler. And then I also have my consulting site, which is hollyklaassen.com. And so that's kind of where I offer all my coaching and consulting services. Regularly, I hold trainings for parents. And so kind of one of the things I really love to help parents with is evaluating your own parenting style, kind of how you've been raised and how that impacts how you're treating your children. A lot of us who have spirited kids were also spirited ourselves when we were younger. I wasn't, but this is something I hear from a lot of parents. And so if we can kind of look back and think, how did our parents nurture or not nurture our big personality when we were little, and how has that impacted us today? So I think just having parents kind of take a step back and look at that, and then really figure out, how are we setting limits with our spirited child? If we're saying no and stop, and you can't do that all the time, we're going to be having constant power struggles and constant meltdowns. So it's really about, deciding ahead of time what are the big things we're going to focus on and which things are we going to let go of. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's about realizing, how do you set those limits in a way that doesn't trigger a meltdown or, attitude or, some of the other things that we see with spirited kids. So those are the things I love to help parents work on. And they're things that I've had to really work on myself over the years to get to the point that we're at now.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, I definitely have noticed, in the short amount of time that I've been doing research on parenting styles, that it is a little bit different for
Mm.
spirited little ones. So thank you for your consulting services as well.
Mm.
That's you know, um, another question that I have is what what are your top tips? Just a couple top tips for parents who are really new at this, any baby or a spirited toddler. What would you say to those parents?
Sorry, you cut out there for a minute. What
Oh,
kind of advice? Sorry.
yeah. What are your top tips for parents who may be new to parenting, or maybe this is their second or third child and they have a high needs baby or a spirited toddler?
Mm. So I would say like probably the biggest two pieces of advice I could give would be, one is just to accept and embrace your child for who they are and not who you thought that they would be. And I think
Mm,
I've seen so many times when parents are able to really do that, it's like a switch flips, and all of a sudden they have more patience, more empathy. They're seeing this amazing little spirited, dramatic little person in front of them, and they're kind of able to even kind of laugh a little bit, and see the good traits as well. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is to really let go of expectations you have around how you should be parenting this child. So we know from all the research and from experience that more easygoing kids you can pretty much use any parenting style with them, and they're probably going to turn out okay.
mm,
So they're very, kind of adaptable and easygoing and go with the flow. Spirited kids, they really need you to be sort of in tune with them and to to set firm limits, but in a flexible way, right? You got to let these kids negotiate and compromise and learn those important skills because they're going to need them throughout
Mhm.
their life, right? Um, yeah, so I think just challenging your own expectations. When they're little, we get this expectation with infants that, oh, I'm going to bring her home and I'm going to cuddle her all day and we're going to go on long walks and we're going to hang out with my friends at restaurants. And that's just a recipe for disappointment because, a lot of times these babies are going to be, screaming in the restaurant and they're not going to want to nap. And so they're going to be cranky all the time. Or you're going to have to stay home all the time just so that they can, you can stick to their sleep schedule. And then as they get a little bit bigger and you're having to sort of, move into discipline, you're going to get probably a lot of judgment from people who think you should be really like laying down the law and who
Mhm.
maybe think that you've made your child this way rather than the fact that you're just adapting to how they actually are and trying to survive, right? And trying to kind of nurture their temperament. So that's probably the top two pieces of advice I could give.
Thank you so much. And then, so I know you've written about, high needs babies in sleep. So just to confirm, high needs babies are able to sleep through the night eventually, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
that's
just want to share.
Yeah, I when I first started my groups, that was a huge misconception. There's some sort of experts in the field who have said that it's not possible, that these babies just can't self-soothe, and so we need to stop expecting that. And I've seen it hundreds or thousands of times where parents have been able to instill those good sleep habits, and sometimes even a baby who we thought was high need was actually just severely overtired. And once they're sleeping, they're actually a really easygoing baby. So that's why I always encourage parents, I don't necessarily say like everyone has to sleep train or anything like that, but keep trying new things. They're, sleep, high need babies are going to maybe protest longer, not always, but they can. When you try new routines or new strategies with sleep, it may take longer to work. Again, not always, but sometimes. So don't just give up and say, it's never going to work. They're never going to sleep. And I'm a huge proponent of do what works. So if you're co-sleeping and everyone's getting sleep and that's sustainable for you, then do it. And
Mhm.
for me personally, with my first daughter, she got to the point where I literally couldn't get her to sleep anymore. I would try for hours and she would not fall asleep. So I wasn't really left with any options. And so a lot of parents are in that boat too. So keep trying things, and once you've decided to do something, then stick with it and be really consistent.
Perfect. So I know you mentioned your services um, and website. So what is the best place for everyone watching this to reach you?
Probably through my consulting website. So I don't know if we could just put a link. My last name is a little tricky with the spelling, but it's hollyklaassen.com.
Absolutely.
And if you sign up for my email list, I let people know of upcoming trainings and online workshops that I'm hosting.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, perfect. I will definitely leave all of your information in the description box below. But Holly, thank you so much for talking with us today. It was so wonderful
No
to share
problem.
my experience.
No problem at all.
Thank you so much.